Alright guys, so clean up our screen a little bit here. Alright, I don't do this very often because it's time consuming and it never pays really what it's worth, but I'm installing new valves on the 2014 Buick with a 2.0 ecotec motor in it. Like I said, this isn't something that I normally do. The only reason I'm doing this is because with the problem that we had when we did the first startup and everything that happened, it bent all the valves. Now, normally I would just replace the head, call it a day, but I can't find a head with lower miles for less than 500 bucks. Neither me nor the customer want to pay that kind of money. So I get to spend my time installing new valves with a lapping tool and lapping compound. It's kind of hard to see, but you know, it's just garden variety Permatex water mix valve grinding compound. You can get this at Napa, O'Reilly's, any auto parts store. So basically I'm just going to kind of show you guys, show you here. I've already got these four on cylinder number 4 and then the exhaust ports on cylinder number 3 done. And don't mind the noise in the background. It's a little cold here, so I've got my my heater running. But basically what you do is you just take, you know, you can't just stick one of these valves, these new valves in there and expect it to seat properly. You have to grind with the lapping compound this valve into the seat area so it gets a proper seat. So that way you don't end up with compression issues or anything like that. All right, so this is really simple. It's just time consuming. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take the valve. I'm just being lazy. You're gonna take the valve, as you guys can see, you're gonna fill that seat area that touches the actual steel seat on the inside of this valve hole or the bore. There's a metal seat that's pressed into the aluminum head. You're going to take this, you're going to fill it full of grinding compound where that little seat connector is, and kind of give you, come here, I'll give you a better view with one that doesn't have any of the compound on it. If you look, there's like a 1/4 inch around the whole entire thing right there. As you can see, I've got the grind compound on that actual spot, which is right there, because that's what's going to seat up against the actual seat right here, that metal ring right here, okay? And what that does is it grinds a groove into that seat right there, that little space right there, onto the seat that is pressed into the head, so that you get a proper seal, so you don't end up with a compression issue or leaking compression when it comes down to it. So basically you put that compound on there, and we're just going to stick this little valve right into the hole, and we're going to put it down like that, right? And then you take this is the long and hard way to do it, but it's got a suction cup on both sides, the bigger ones for bigger valves, smaller one for smaller valves. It's just a suction cup. You're going to take that, you're going to stick it to that valve, right? Once it's stuck to that valve, you're just going to sit there and you're going to turn it, you're going to smack it a couple times. You're going to keep turning it, and then, you know, every once in a while the suction cup's going to pop off, but then you kind of just, and you do this for, you know, a couple minutes. You're just going to keep doing it, smack it a couple times, make sure you get that compound where it's supposed to go, make sure your suction cup works properly. That's why I said it's a cheap version. You know, they have better versions of this, but this was 10 bucks. So, and I've been through 3 of them. I don't know where the heck the other ones went, so I just keep buying new ones. But this one, it's a Carlisle brand. Still got a limited lifetime warranty, which is a good thing. And it's literally part number 505. I'll kind of show you guys right there. It's a little hard to see in the light, but 505, and it's called the valve lapper. Got this from Napa. Like I said, 10 bucks. It isn't that big of a deal, so you wouldn't feel bad about losing it like I did. or you know, if the suction cup kind of breaks on you or whatever the case may be, you just, like I said, you just keep going and you keep going and keep going. So I'm going to pause this real quick, and then I'll come back to you guys once I get this done, just to kind of show you, once I pull it out, just to kind of show you how it's no longer, it's shiny, it's got kind of a groove to it, which means that it's worn a groove into the actual seat and the valve so it can create a proper seal. And once I'm done with that, what we'll do is, I'm doing it the different way. We're going to put a spark plug in there with all 4 valves down there, because there's 2 on the intake, 2 on the exhaust. Not everyone has that. I'm going to spray this down in that little area right there, that little bore hole, basically where this cylinder head mates up to the actual piston, the cylinder on the block, okay? And we're going to see if it starts leaking out of the exhaust port or the intake port, then we're going to know that it's not properly seated and I need to re-lap the valves, okay? So I'm going to pause this. I'll be right back with you guys when I get this one done, and I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll go from there. Stick with me. Alright, so been a couple of minutes, been doing this back and forth, popping it out and everything. Now I'm going to pull this valve out. Just going to kind of show you guys. Now you're going to see that valve grinding compound. You see where it all kind of went to and everything? Man, this camera does not want to autofocus to save my... There we go. Alright, you see where it's a different color than the actual valve grinding compound? That's because that whole area has been grinding against the seat right over here. Alright? So if we take the new one, the one that I haven't ground yet, or the one I haven't, I should say, lapped quite yet, we'll pop that out. I'll kind of show you here. As you can see how smooth and everything that is? And then you're going to see this one. It's not so smooth, right? The reasoning, like I said, is because you're trying to grind and it's very small, but you want to use that lapping compound to grind down between these two, so that way they have a groove with each other. So when it closes, that groove creates a nice tight seal between the valve and the seat, okay? So I'll go through and I'll just kind of clean this up a little bit. Clean all the excess and all the already ground down compound here. We'll just kind of look at it together here. And it's raining outside. There's supposed to be a wintry mix out today, so that's why I'm happy to be inside. And that's why I have the heater on. Alright, so now that it is ground down, or cleaned off, I will show you. You see that little ripple right there? Fingernail length, right? That little spot right there, in comparison to this. See how that's nice and smooth still? That one's got that nice little ground down spot, right? That right there helps with the seal. Now I'm going to end up doing this a little bit more just to kind of get it more of a seal down further. You just got to keep going at it, basically. But that's how you do this, so that it properly seals between the valve and the seat itself. So when you have your compression stroke or your combustion stroke, you don't lose any of that pressure, any of that air, any of that that air that's been sucked in through the intake. When the valves open, it sucks air into the cylinder, and then the valve closes. When that valve closes, it needs a proper seal, so that way when the piston come up, it can compress all that air and cause the combustion that you need in order for your vehicle to fire. You know, you have your spark and you have your fuel, but you also need that air compressed. And what that does is, once that air is compressed and the spark plug ignites the fuel, it pushes that piston back down, and that's how you have the engine rotating, whether it's a 4-cylinder, 3-cylinder, V12, it doesn't matter. That's how you get your compression. So when you have low compression issues, sometimes on these vehicles, like this one specifically, these have what's called a direct port injection. This hole right here is where the injector comes directly into the cylinder, right? So it directly squirts that fuel into that cylinder with the spark plug hole that's right here, and that causes your combustion between the spark plug and the injector squirting that fuel in. The thing about it is, though, it's kind of hard to see because I cleaned it a lot, but on these direct port systems, since they have that injector directly into the cylinder head or into the cylinder versus a lot of them run it into the intake and then it just goes in through the intake valves and all that stuff, this creates a major carbon problem. 6.2s on GM, pretty much anything, was it 2014 or newer that had direct port injection, had the issue with carbon buildup. 6.2s, 5.3s, they actually had if you don't know what it means, it's a TSB or a tech service bulletin for vehicles that were coming in for misfires, and they couldn't figure out why. Well, the reasoning was because these valves, since they have direct port injection, would have a major carbon buildup problem. And I'll grab you an old valve to kind of show you exactly what I'm talking about. Now mind you, this valve is bent, but either way, it's still an intake valve, okay? Now this valve, if you look at it, you see all the crap on the back side of it? That is carbon buildup, okay? And they get so caked on there that it ends up going between the seat and the valve, causing it not to seal properly. So what happens when it doesn't seal properly, like we discussed before, guys, you end up with compression issues. You can no longer get that compression of that air that's sucked in to be able to cause that combustion properly. So you have a leak. That leak is going back out the intake, and it can cause misfires. It can cause, if you hear, you hear a popping noise every once in a while. That's because you have air, or the combustion of that compressed air is no longer being able to stay in that cylinder. It's going through between the valve and the seat itself back out the intake, okay? It was a very big issue. And like I said, it's not only GMs. Any new vehicle that has direct port injection, I have worked on Volkswagens, I have worked on Audis, I have worked on GMs. Some Fords have it, the newer style, the 3.5 Eco Boost engines have direct port injection as well. That's why a lot of these have to have the TSB that they require. These valves need to be cleaned, okay? It sucks because the carbon buildup inside there requires a lot of work to get that whole entire intake area, that port where the air comes in to the backside of that valve, gets full of carbon. Not just the valve, the whole entire intake port, the back side of this seat, everything gets full of carbon. And then they have to go through and they have to do special instructions on how to clean those. Now, I have found ways, cheap man ways, to clean it enough that it gets most of the carbon buildup off of it, so that way the valve seals properly again. But that doesn't solve the issue. You're gonna end up with the same problem 50,000 miles down the road. That's why when it comes to these vehicles that have direct port injection, I strongly suggest every 2 to 3 fuel tanks, when you fill up every 2 to 3 times, throw some seafoam, throw some fuel injector cleaner, some fuel system cleaner inside of your fuel tank. Along with, you can get some spray that goes in your intake manifold. You spray it through your throttle when the engine is running. What that does is it's a seafoam based stuff. That's the one I use. But what it does is it comes in through the intake and it breaks up all that carbon buildup, and then it goes into the cylinder and out the exhaust. It cleans it up. You'll see smoking like crazy when you run the stuff through the intake. There is a procedure that GM has on this TSB that's the basic same concept. They throw it into the fuel system, they stick it in the intake, and they have to go through with that stuff, and they have to clean the carbon buildup that is on the back side. On the back side of these valves, as you can see, all the crud built up in there. This is like the least intrusive way for them to clean it. It's a 3 liquid process, if I can remember correctly, to properly clean the crud off of these valves. And what's worse is if you look at this side, that has crap on it too. That is carbon buildup as well. And when you have carbon buildup on the combustion side, then you have airflow issues, okay? So the way it works is you need to have everything in a certain way or within spec and tolerances for that compression to properly work. When you have carbon buildup on those valves, whether it be on the back side or on the compression area inside of the cylinder itself, you end up with improper knock, okay? That's for another video. I'm not going to get into that. But yes, that's what we do, okay? We have valve lapping, all right? It creates that nice little groove right there. And if you feel it, it's no longer smooth like the rest of that. It's got a nice little ground down to it. So when you put that back in and it goes down in there, granted, it'll have springs and everything on the other side to hold this in place and pull back. So that way it stays closed until the cam opens it up. But the way that that sits in there, now that it has a little groove in there, it has a groove against the seat itself, right? So when it gets that compression, the compression stays inside of the cylinder. That way it doesn't escape through the sides of the valve itself and cause compression issues, which in turn causes misfires, okay? So like I said, I'm gonna pause the video again. I'm gonna finish lapping the other valve. I'm gonna do a little bit more on this one just because I want a little bit more on there. But I'm gonna lap this other valve, and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna show you guys, once I put the spark plug in there, we're gonna spray some blaster down inside here and see if it leaks through the exhaust port or the intake port or the valve seal itself, okay? Make sure that it doesn't have any leaks so that we have a proper seal, whether it be on the exhaust valves or the intake valves. All right, so stay with me, guys. I'll be back with you again in a couple of minutes. All right, guys, we're back. Okay, so I got them all ground, I should say lapped, and they're all in. Now, I don't have the springs on them because the engine is upside down, so there's really no need to. But we're just gonna take a spark plug. This is one of the spark plugs of the many that I have for this, or 4. And I know people might give me crap for this, but we're gonna put the spark plug on this way, okay? Can't do it with all engines like this, but on this one you can, just because that's how it kind of works. Anyway, we're gonna put this down on the spark plug hole. We're gonna make sure it's just snug. It doesn't need to be, you know, torqued or any of that crap. It just needs to be snug so it's got a nice seal. And then, like I said, we're gonna take some PB Blaster. You can use water if you want to. We're just gonna take PB Blaster and we're gonna spray inside here, okay? We're just gonna fill this whole area, all around the valves, to make sure that we have a nice, strong seal, okay? Get it up, there we go. And a little bit might come out of the spark plug, or the ejector hole, whatever, no big deal. What we care about is making sure that nothing comes out with these two valves, or the intake valves, okay? You got your 2 exhausts on this side, 2 intake on this side. And what we're doing is we're looking down here, and we're looking to see if we have any leaks. We're also looking on the intake side, which is on the back side. You guys can't really see it, okay? Another way to tell is by watching this liquid right here. If that liquid starts going down, you know you have a leak. You know that your valves are not sealing properly. It can be the spark plug too, so that's why I say make sure it's snug, but you don't need to torque it down. So we sit here and we watch it, okay? Usually I'll watch it for like 2-3 minutes, kind of think with my phone, look down, see if I got any leakage or anything like that. If you don't have any leaks within 2 or 3 minutes, you have a proper valve seal. That means you did the valve lapping correctly, okay? See, and it's the same thing you go through no matter if you have 3 cylinders, 4 cylinders, 6, 8, 10, 12, I don't give a crap, you got 100. It is the exact same process, okay? You lap the valve, you test to make sure that you got a proper valve seat, and once you do, you move on to the next one. You keep going and make sure everything's the same steps, same process, okay? Like I said, it is a very, very simple and easy way to do it, or job, but it is extremely time consuming, especially when you have these kind of heads that have 2 or more intake or exhaust valves, okay? A lot of other vehicles, like LS's, 5.3s, 6.0s, they only have 2, okay? They have an intake and an exhaust. That's it, one of each. Some of these, on the other hand, 4 cylinders, some V6s and stuff like that, have 2 per cylinder. So they have 2 intake, 2 exhaust. Same thing goes on with like your 2-stroke motors, you know, like 4-wheelers, golf carts, anything that has anything like that. Some of them can have 2, some of them can have 4. Doesn't it? No rhyme or reason. Same basic principle, same process. You got a valve, you got a seat. You need to make sure that they seal properly so you don't end up with any cylinder head or cylinder leaks, combustion and stuff like that, kind of prevent any misfires. So, like I said, as I'm talking to you guys, we'll pull out my flashlight, little pen light, and I'm gonna look inside here, okay? And I'm gonna actually show you guys this. If you look inside that cylinder, get it in there, you guys can see it is leaking, okay? That means that I have an improper seal on this one. Okay, I'm gonna flip I have an improper seal on this valve right here. Because as you guys can see, the liquid is coming from that one right there. There's nothing over there. Camera to there. Nothing over there, but we have leak over here, okay? And we would do the same thing over here on the intake side. I will check inside of this hole to see if there's any leaks down there. But as being that it's leaking right there, that means that I need to keep lapping this valve right here, so that it doesn't leak anymore. And like I said, it's never gonna be 100% the first time you go, okay? Sometimes you might need to relap 3 or 4 times. But in the end, before you start moving on to the next, you need to make sure that each one of those ones in each cylinder has the proper seal, okay? Otherwise, like I said, you're gonna end up with problems, misfires, a whole whirlwind of issues, okay? So I'm gonna leave you guys at that, just so you guys can kind of get an update on what I'm doing. If this helped you at all, make sure to like, comment, share, whatever the case may be. Follow my YouTube page, Kramer's Auto Repair. Follow my business page, once again, Kramer's Auto Repair. If you guys have any questions, like I said, feel free to message me, make a comment, whatever the case may be, and we'll see you on the flip side. I'll make another video once this is all done and I put this thing back together, and hopefully have this engine running and get it back to the customer so that they can have their vehicle back. All right, guys, that's all for now. Have a great day.